The sea was a mirror that morning, a flat blue expanse stretching out until it melted into sky. From the open windows of the rehabilitation clinic, salt air drifted in, mingling with the faint scent of antiseptic and lavender oil. Giannis Petro liked mornings like this, quiet, clean, untroubled. The world outside was chaos, tourists, noise, endless light, but in this room he controlled the pace of every breath. He checked the patient files spread across his desk. His schedule was full: elderly locals, recovering swimmers, a cyclist with knee trouble, all familiar, predictable. But his eyes stopped at the last name on the list: Theophilus Markos, former Olympic boxer. Right shoulder fracture. Discharged from Athens Orthopedic. Referred for physical rehabilitation. Giannis frowned slightly. He had seen Theophilus's face before, on magazine covers, sports headlines, television interviews that made Greece swell with pride. The prodigy who fought like fire itself. Until one night, everything had gone wrong. A bad fall. A torn shoulder. A career that ended in one silent second. Giannis closed the file and sighed. Famous clients meant attention. He didn't want attention. He glanced at the clock, 9:45 a.m. He adjusted the blinds, straightened the therapy table, and waited. When the door opened, sunlight followed first, then a shadow taller and heavier than he expected. Theophilus Markos stood there, shoulders broad despite the injury, dark curls tousled by the wind. He wore a loose white shirt that gaped slightly at the collarbone, the fabric hinting at muscle beneath. His right arm hung in a black sling, his left hand holding sunglasses and a small bottle of water. His skin carried that soft bronze of someone who lived under sun and sweat. His eyes, deep, storm gray, scanned the room, then settled on Giannis. "You're the therapist?" His voice was rough, like gravel softened by honey. "Yes," Giannis said calmly. "Giannis Petro. You must be Mr. Markos." "Theophilus," he corrected. "Mr. Markos makes me feel like I should be giving a speech." There was a hint of a smile, quick, defensive, then gone. Giannis gestured to the treatment chair. "Please sit." Theophilus moved slowly, every motion deliberate, guarded. When he sat, he winced. Giannis noticed, a tiny flinch, but to a trained eye, it said everything. "How bad is the pain today?" Theophilus gave a half laugh. "Bad enough to make me miss being punched in the face." Giannis didn't smile. "I'll take that as a 7 out of 10. He began to unpack the ultrasound gel and bandages, explaining the procedure, steady, professional, detached. But as he stepped closer, the air shifted. There was always a moment, that subtle change in silence, when his patients became aware of how near he was. For most, it meant comfort. For some, discomfort. For Theophilus, it was both. When Giannis's hand brushed the edge of his shoulder, Theophilus inhaled sharply. The therapist paused. "Did that hurt?" "No," Theophilus murmured, his gaze dropping to the floor. "Just cold hands." Giannis almost smiled this time. "They warm up fast." He began to move his fingers in slow, circular motions along the scar tissue. The skin there was taut and uneven, like waves hardened into flesh. Each press, each glide of his hand carried precision, and yet, under the surface, something electric. Theophilus sat still, his jaw tight, but his breathing deepened unconsciously. Giannis focused on his work, refusing to meet the man's eyes. He told himself it was routine. Muscle tension, scar mobilization, controlled pressure. But the rhythm between touch and reaction became hypnotic, an unspoken dialogue of breath and pulse. Finally, Theophilus broke the silence. "You do this every day, touch people's pain?" "It's my job," Giannis said softly. "Doesn't it get to you?" Giannis looked up, surprised by the question. "What do you mean?" "Feeling everything they can't say. I know that look, the way you concentrate. Like you're listening to what the body hides." Giannis's throat tightened. He had never heard it put that way. "You think too much," he murmured, almost as a defense. "Maybe," Theophilus said, his lips curving faintly. "But I've had nothing but time to think lately." The room grew quiet again, only the faint hum of the ultrasound device and the rhythmic hiss of the sea outside. Giannis stepped back. "That's enough for today. Don't push the joint, keep it rested until our next session." Theophilus flexed his fingers slightly, testing his range. "You're gentler than you look. And you're more stubborn than you should be." That earned a low laugh, brief but real. "So, how long until I'm healed?" Giannis hesitated. "Depends. Physically a few months. But. He met Theophilus's gaze. "You have to want to heal. Most people don't." Theophilus studied him, eyes narrowing slightly. "And you?" You ever want to? Giannis's hand froze mid-motion, still holding the gel. What makes you think I'm broken? Theophilus tilted his head. You talk like someone who's been through pain but made peace with it by pretending it doesn't hurt anymore. Giannis felt something catch deep in his chest, a small, unwelcome truth. He didn't answer. Theophilus smiled faintly. I'm right, aren't I? Giannis stepped away, his voice even. Session's over. That night, Giannis stayed late at the clinic. The sky turned lavender, the sea darkened, and lights flickered across the caldera. He busied himself cleaning, rearranging, pretending he wasn't thinking of Theophilus's words. He had always lived in control, his life divided neatly between work, home, and silence. But that single afternoon had unsettled something in him. The boxer's voice still echoed, "You touch pain like it's something sacred." He turned off the lights and stepped out into the narrow Santorini street. The wind carried salt and jasmine from the nearby villas. He tried to forget the look in Theophilus's eyes, the mixture of challenge and longing, like a storm barely contained. But memory is a stubborn thing. The next day Theophilus arrived early. He sat on the clinic steps, sunlight glinting off the water behind him. His shirt was unbuttoned halfway, sleeves rolled, the sling gone. Giannis frowned. You're supposed to be resting that shoulder. I was bored, Theophilus said simply. Besides, I'm tired of feeling fragile. He rose to his feet, close, too close. For a moment, Giannis forgot to breathe. The scent of salt and faint cologne clung to him. His hair, messy and wind-tossed, framed a face both fierce and unexpectedly gentle. Giannis stepped aside, opening the door. Try not to make a habit of disobeying medical advice. No promises, Theophilus said with a grin that didn't quite hide the pain beneath. Inside they resumed the routine. But the atmosphere had changed, less clinical, more charged. Theophilus asked questions about Giannis's life, his past, his reasons for working here instead of Athens. Giannis deflected each one. You don't like being known, Theophilus said quietly. Knowing isn't the same as understanding. Then let me understand you, he said, and the way he said it, so softly, so sincerely, made something in Giannis tremble. He turned away, pretending to adjust the therapy tools. Focus on your shoulder. Right. My shoulder, Theophilus said, voice dipping low, amused. That's what we're healing. Giannis's fingers faltered. For a fraction of a second, the air between them seemed to hum. His pulse picked up, though his expression remained calm. He couldn't afford to let a line blur, not again. After the session, Theophilus lingered at the window, gazing at the horizon. Do you ever get used to the view? Giannis followed his gaze. The sea shimmered, endless and cruelly beautiful. You don't get used to beauty, he said. You just learn to look at it without wanting it. Theophilus turned to him then, eyes dark as the deep water beyond. And what if it looks back? Giannis's breath caught. For a heartbeat neither spoke. Then Theophilus smiled, soft, tired, almost tender, and reached for his sling. See you tomorrow, doctor? Giannis nodded, unable to reply. When the door closed behind him, silence filled the room again. Only the sound of waves remained, steady, eternal. Giannis leaned against the counter, pressing a hand to his chest. His fingers still carried the ghost of warmth, the pulse beneath skin, the tremor of muscles healing and awakening. He told himself it was just professional concern. He didn't believe it. As dusk settled over Santorini, he walked home along the cliffside. The island was quiet, washed in gold and shadow. Below, the sea breathed against the rocks, endless, alive. Giannis stopped, closed his eyes and inhaled deeply. For the first time in a long while, the silence inside him wasn't peace. It was ache, a soft, dangerous ache that whispered, "Scars don't fade that easily." The days grew slower after that first week, like the sun itself lingered longer over Santorini just to watch them. Each morning, Giannis opened the clinic before the world stirred, the sea a silver mirror, the cobblestone streets still asleep. He liked those hours of silence before Theophilus arrived, the calm before the quiet man filled the space with his presence. Restless, alive, impossible to ignore. But lately, Giannis caught himself listening for the soft tread of his patient's footsteps before they came. He hated that awareness. It meant something had shifted. When Theophilus entered that morning, he wasn't wearing the sling again. "You're impossible," Giannis muttered. "You keep saying that," Theophilus said, half smiling, half daring. "Maybe I like testing your patience." "You're succeeding," Giannis replied, though his voice lacked real irritation. He guided him to the therapy table. Theophilus sat, looking out toward the sea, sunlight cutting across his face. The lines of fatigue around his eyes softened in the golden light, revealing something fragile under all that confidence. Giannis placed a hand on his shoulder. Theophilus exhaled slowly. You always touch like you're afraid I'll break. Because you might, Giannis said quietly. Theophilus turned his head slightly, their faces close enough for Giannis to smell the faint trace of salt and soap on his skin. And what about you? You look like you'll shatter if anyone touches you back. Giannis didn't answer. He pressed his thumb against the scar tissue, pretending focus. The muscle tensed beneath his fingers. Relax, he murmured. Can't, Theophilus breathed. Not with you this close. The words hung there, dangerous and gentle at once. Giannis's pulse stumbled. He stepped back, reaching for the towel to hide the tremor in his hands. We'll stop here for today. Theophilus frowned. You're running again. Giannis turned toward him. This is therapy, not whatever you're imagining. Is it? Theophilus asked, his voice softening. Then why does it feel like you're the one who needs saving? Something in Giannis snapped. Enough, he said sharply, though his eyes betrayed exhaustion more than anger. You don't know me, Theophilus. The boxer stared at him for a long moment, then nodded, jaw tightening. You're right, he said, voice low. Maybe I want to. He left without another word. That night, the island glowed beneath a swollen moon. The clinic was empty, but Giannis couldn't bring himself to go home. He sat at his desk, pretending to fill reports, but his thoughts wandered. The sea murmured outside, a steady whisper through the open window. He thought of Theophilus's words, of the look in his eyes when he said them, not lustful, not bold, but tender in a way that frightened him more. At 9:30, a knock broke the silence. When Giannis opened the door, Theophilus stood there, damp from the night air, holding a paper bag. Dinner, he said simply. Peace offering. Giannis hesitated. You shouldn't be here. Then throw me out, Theophilus said, stepping inside before Giannis could protest. He set the bag on the counter, souvlaki, warm bread, and a bottle of red wine. The scent of roasted herbs filled the air, blending with the salt breeze. Giannis sighed. You're impossible. I told you that already, Theophilus said with a grin. You look like you live on coffee and guilt. Despite himself, Giannis laughed softly. It startled them both. Theophilus's smile widened. Finally, you do have a laugh. Don't get used to it. I'll take what I can get. They ate quietly for a while, the only sound the soft clink of cutlery and the rhythmic crash of waves below. The wine loosened something between them, not recklessness but a fragile comfort. You know, Theophilus said after a while, people talk about pain like it's the enemy. But it's honest. It doesn't lie. You can trust pain. Giannis looked at him, candlelight flickering across both their faces. Trusting pain is easy. Trusting what comes after it, that's harder. Their eyes met and didn't look away. For a long moment, neither spoke. Giannis's heart beat too fast. He could feel the pull, quiet but undeniable, between them. He wanted to move, to say something that would break the spell. Instead, Theophilus reached across the table and brushed his fingers against Giannis's wrist, just once. The touch was fleeting, light as breath, but it sent a tremor through him. Giannis drew his hand back slowly, struggling for words. You should go. Should I? Yes. Theophilus stood, watching him with unreadable eyes. You build walls like a man afraid of drowning. Maybe I am, Giannis whispered. Theophilus smiled sadly. Then stopped living by the shore. He left quietly, his footsteps fading into the night. Giannis stayed where he was, surrounded by the scent of wine and rosemary, the echo of touch still warm against his skin. The next morning, the world went on as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Their sessions grew quieter, more intimate in ways neither acknowledged. Sometimes Theophilus would close his eyes as Giannis worked, his breathing slow and steady, trusting him completely. Sometimes Giannis's fingers would linger a heartbeat too long, tracing the edge of healed skin as though memorizing it. Outside, summer thickened, tourists filled the island, laughter echoing down the white alleys. But inside the clinic, the world felt smaller, suspended in an air of quiet tension. One afternoon the power flickered out. The machines went silent. The room dimmed to the amber hue of late sunlight. Theophilus shifted on the table. Looks like the universe wants us to take a break. Giannis exhaled, amused despite himself. Stay still. We can still stretch manually. Theophilus smirked. Always so serious. Someone has to be. Giannis reached to adjust his arm. Their hands brushed, brief, accidental, but neither pulled away. Theophilus's gaze lifted, locking on him. Giannis. Oh? Tell me something true. Anything. Giannis hesitated. He wanted to say no. But the stillness in the room demanded honesty. I don't like losing control, he said quietly. Theophilus smiled faintly. Then maybe control's overrated. He said it lightly, but the words burrowed deep. When Giannis looked up, Theophilus's eyes were soft, not the hard gray of the boxer who fought the world, but something gentler, vulnerable. The silence stretched. Outside, the sea shimmered with dying light. Giannis took a slow breath. You're improving, he said finally. You're changing the subject. Yes, Giannis admitted. I am. Theophilus's lips curved in quiet amusement. I'll take that as progress too. By the end of the week, the tension had become its own language. Giannis found himself thinking of Theophilus between sessions. The way he smiled, the rough warmth of his voice, the steadiness in his eyes when everything else felt uncertain. He told himself it was temporary, an emotional reflex between patient and therapist. But each time he repeated the lie, it rang hollow. That Friday, as the sky turned to liquid gold, Theophilus lingered by the window again after his session. His shoulder had healed enough for him to roll it gently. You're getting stronger, Giannis said. Because of you. Giannis shook his head. Because you wanted to. Theophilus turned to him, expression serious. No. Because you believed I could. The words hit harder than they should have. Giannis looked away, flustered. Belief isn't magic, Theophilus. Maybe not. But it's the first thing that made me want to fight again. The silence that followed felt fragile, like a thread pulled too tight. Theophilus stepped closer. Giannis felt his pulse rise with every inch that vanished between them. He could smell the faint citrus of Theophilus's cologne, hear the soft catch in his breath. I don't want to ruin this, Theophilus said softly. But every time you touch me, I feel something I can't ignore anymore. Giannis's voice was barely a whisper. Don't? Why not? Because you'll regret it. I already regret not saying it sooner. Giannis's eyes closed. He could feel warmth radiating from the man standing before him, close enough to feel the ghost of breath between them. I'm your therapist, he murmured. And I'm your patient, Theophilus replied. But I'm also a man who can't stop thinking about you. The confession hung in the air like lightning before rain. Giannis took a step back, though his heart begged otherwise. You need to leave. Theophilus searched his face, then nodded slowly. You keep building walls, Giannis. But one day something will break through. And when it does, I hope it doesn't destroy you. He walked out without looking back. Giannis stood alone, trembling in the quiet. The sea beyond the window shimmered with fading light, endless and unanswering. He pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the ache there, raw, familiar, and terrifyingly alive. For the first time in years, he couldn't tell where his control ended and longing began. Between his hands and his heart, something had started to shift. Something fragile, something real. For days, Giannis avoided looking out toward the sea. The horizon had begun to mock him. That endless blue, calm on the surface but violent underneath. It was exactly how he felt. Every time Theophilus's name appeared on his schedule, something inside him twisted between dread and anticipation. He told himself he could still fix this, restore boundaries, rebuild distance. But distance was already gone. It had dissolved the night Theophilus's hand brushed his wrist, the night he confessed that he couldn't stop thinking about him. Now each session felt like walking a wire stretched between desire and duty. When Theophilus arrived that afternoon, the sky was heavy with approaching rain. He looked different, quiet, tense. Gone was the teasing smile that used to linger on his lips. Rough night? Giannis asked, trying for calm. Theophilus gave a faint shrug. Couldn't sleep. Shoulder aches when it rains. Giannis gestured to the table. Let's try a heat compress before we stretch. As he unrolled the warm towel, Theophilus spoke again, low, hesitant. You've been avoiding me. Giannis paused. I've been busy. That's a lie, Theophilus said, softly but certain. You're scared. Giannis set the towel on his shoulder. This isn't about fear. Then what is it about? It's about ethics. About what's right. And what if what's right feels wrong when I'm with you? Giannis looked at him sharply. Don't? Theophilus met his gaze, voice trembling with something like defiance and heartbreak all at once. You think I'm here because I can't control myself? I'm here because for the first time since the accident, I feel alive again. Giannis's breath caught. You'll regret saying that. Maybe, Theophilus murmured. But I'll regret silence more. He reached up, slow, deliberate, and caught Giannis's wrist before he could pull away. Their eyes locked. The contact was simple, but the air thickened instantly. Giannis's composure began to fracture. "You don't understand what you're asking." "I'm not asking," Theophilus whispered. "I'm telling you the truth." The storm outside finally broke, rain drumming against the window. Thunder rolled in the distance. Giannis could feel his heartbeat echoing in time with it. "You should have stepped away." "You didn't?" Instead, he said quietly, "You shouldn't be doing this." Theophilus's reply was barely audible. "Then stop me." Giannis didn't move. The silence between them answered for him. They stood there for a long moment, the sound of rain filling the space that words couldn't. Giannis finally exhaled, a shudder that sounded like surrender. "This can't happen," he said again even as he leaned closer. Theophilus's breath brushed his cheek. "Then why does it feel like it already has?" That was the breaking point. The moment hesitation turned into gravity. The kiss came softly, almost accidental, a meeting of two storms that had circled each other too long. It wasn't hungry, it was desperate in its tenderness, a confession made without language. Giannis's hands, once so precise and professional, trembled as they rose to Theophilus's face. He could feel the faint roughness of stubble, the warmth beneath his fingers. Theophilus leaned into the touch as though it anchored him, the tension in his shoulders dissolving under Giannis's palms. When they parted for breath, Giannis whispered, "This isn't healing." Theophilus's reply was immediate. "It is. Just not the kind they taught you." The words undid him. Rain streaked the window in silver threads as they moved through the room, not hurried, not reckless. Every touch felt like a question, and every answer came wordlessly. Giannis traced the scar along Theophilus's shoulder, feeling the faint tremor beneath his fingertips. "This," he whispered, voice unsteady, "this is where it hurts most." Theophilus covered Giannis's hand with his own. "Then start there." Outside, lightning flashed, painting the room in brief, ghostly light. Shadows swayed across the white walls, their movements mirrored in the faint rhythm of the storm. There was no pretense left, only closeness, skin against skin, the sound of rain and heartbeats merging. It wasn't a collision, it was an unraveling, slow and reverent. When the world blurred beyond them, Giannis pressed his forehead against Theophilus's and whispered something half lost to the thunder. A name, a prayer, a surrender. The rest dissolved into silence, the kind that exists only when pain finally yields to tenderness. Later the storm faded. Giannis lay awake, the window open to the night air. Theophilus slept beside him, one arm draped loosely over his chest. The steady weight of it felt both comforting and unbearable. The scent of rain lingered, mingling with the warmth of skin and the faint salt from the sea. Outside, waves broke against the cliffs, steady and eternal. Giannis watched the rise and fall of Theophilus's breath, his face softened in sleep. There was no defiance there now, only peace. For the first time Giannis realized how fragile that peace was. He brushed a strand of hair from Theophilus's forehead, his hand trembling. The urge to stay like this, to forget everything beyond this quiet room, was almost stronger than reason. But reason always came back. It always did. He slipped out of bed quietly, pulling on his shirt, moving to the window. The night was clear again, stars scattered like fragments of light across the dark sky. He thought of all the rules he'd broken, the promises he'd made to himself, to never again blur lines, to never again let care turn into something that could destroy him. Behind him, Theophilus stirred, half awake. "Giannis?" Giannis turned. "Go back to sleep." "Are you leaving?" "Not yet." Theophilus's eyes opened fully then, soft and uncertain. "Do you regret it?" Giannis hesitated, his throat tight. "No," he said finally. "That's the problem." Theophilus smiled faintly, then closed his eyes again. Within moments, his breathing evened out. Giannis leaned against the window frame, staring at the horizon. The first hint of dawn was already touching the edge of the world, pale gold over dark blue water. Somewhere deep inside he knew nothing would ever be simple again. Between pain and tenderness something had taken root, something too real to deny and too dangerous to name. The days that followed blurred like watercolor. Giannis and Theophilus moved through the clinic as if nothing had changed, yet everything had. A single glance across the corridor could undo them both. In every touch, a bandage adjusted, a shoulder steadied, there pulsed the quiet memory of rain, skin, breath. Giannis caught himself counting hours. Not to measure progress but distance. How long since that night, how far before the next time he would have to pretend his hands didn't remember? Theophilus healed faster than expected. The doctors called it miraculous. Giannis knew better. Pain had found purpose. Desire too. One afternoon, Theophilus waited by the terrace overlooking the sea. The horizon shimmered, the sun caught between clouds, the air tasting faintly of salt and orange blossom. Giannis joined him, careful to keep his voice level. "You shouldn't be up here without support." "I'm fine," Theophilus said. "You made sure of that." Giannis looked away. "I did my job." Theophilus smiled sadly. "Is that all it was?" Silence. The question hung between them, heavy as heat. Giannis's throat tightened. "It can't be more," he said at last. "You'll go back to Athens. I'll stay here. We'll forget." Theophilus's gaze held his. "Can you?" Giannis had no answer. They walked along the narrow path that wound down the cliff. The wind tugged at their clothes, the Aegean below them restless and bright. Every step felt like leaving something behind. When they reached the small chapel at the curve of the bay, white stone, blue door, candles flickering inside, Theophilus stopped. "Do you ever pray?" he asked. Giannis hesitated. "Not anymore." "I do," Theophilus said softly. "Since the crash I pray every morning. Not for my life, for meaning. And lately, for you." Giannis turned sharply. "Don't?" Theophilus stepped closer, voice barely above the wind. "You keep building walls that hurt you more than they protect. What's the point of healing others if you can't let yourself be healed?" Giannis felt something break open inside him. "Because if I let go, I lose control. And when I lose control, people get hurt." "You think I'm afraid of that?" Theophilus asked. Giannis searched his eyes, deep brown, steady, shining with the reflection of the sea. "You should be." The bell from the chapel rang once, faint and metallic. Giannis took a step back. "You'll leave tomorrow." "That's best." Theophilus nodded slowly. "If that's what you want. It's what has to happen." He started to turn away, but Theophilus caught his hand. "Giannis," he said, voice trembling, "don't walk away from something true just because it hurts." Giannis looked down at their joined hands. Calloused fingers, one trembling. He thought of the first day they met, how cold Theophilus had been, how lifeless his eyes. Now those same eyes burned with life, with him. He squeezed once hard. "Goodbye, Theo." That night the island was quiet. The clinic lights glowed dimly, the waves whispering against the rocks. Giannis sat at his desk long after everyone had gone, paperwork untouched. He could still feel Theophilus's touch in the creases of his palms. He closed his eyes and the scent of rain came back, the weight of confession between breaths. He wanted to believe distance would dull it. It didn't. When dawn arrived, he went down to the harbor. The ferry was waiting, engines low and steady. Theophilus stood at the pier, a small suitcase beside him, the wind in his hair. He smiled when he saw Giannis, a real smile, gentle, accepting. "You came." "I wanted to be sure you left," Giannis said, but the words sounded hollow. Theophilus laughed quietly. "You're terrible at lying." He reached out, brushed his fingers against Giannis's sleeve. "When the pain gets bad, remember, you taught me how to move again. Maybe that's enough." Giannis felt his chest tighten. "And you taught me how to feel again. Maybe that's too much." For a moment, neither moved. The air was thick with everything unsaid. Then Theophilus stepped forward and kissed him, softly, briefly, the kind of kiss that ends before it begins. A promise and a farewell in one. When he pulled away, his eyes shone. "Between pain and tenderness," he whispered, "I'll always find you." And then he was gone, walking up the ramp, disappearing into the white hum of the ferry. Giannis stood there until the boat became a dot against the horizon. The wind lifted, carrying the sound of gulls and the faint echo of Theophilus's voice in his memory. He finally turned toward the sea, the sun rising behind him. The water glittered gold, endless and alive. Somewhere out there, Theophilus was breathing the same salt air, carrying the same ache. Giannis pressed a hand to his heart, feeling its steady rhythm. Not broken, just changed. He whispered into the wind, "Goodbye, Theo," and the sea seemed to answer with a hush, like understanding. For the first time, the pain didn't drown him. It simply coexisted, a quiet ache balanced by something softer, truer. Between pain and tenderness there was life. And that was enough.